Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth. And as always, I'm your host, the Game Master. And today we'll be talking about Wonder Woman, Superman, the Philadelphia Experiment, the Phantom Stranger, Kingdom Come, the Infinity Gauntlet, Hyper Time, the Hellfire Club, the Fatal Five, just all sorts of stuff. This started out as an innocent time travel adventure, but it quickly snowballed into a crisis or 0 hour level event. At any rate, before we get into all of that, smash that like button, make sure you're still subscribed, ring the bell for notifications, and as always, leave a comment because that helps us out on our end with the YouTube algorithm. We've got a great community here, and it's all thanks to you guys. Thank you so much for being here. With all that said, let's dive in. The prologue to this one takes place around 1950 when Lois Kent and Selena Wayne both give birth. A group of villains from the 30th century called the Fatal Five travel back to this point in time using a stolen time bubble that they took from the Legion of Superheroes. And the Fatal Five tries to pull a Terminator by getting rid of the quote unquote Super Sons here and now. And while the kids' parents lend a hand, the Fatal Five were a handful for the entire Legion of Superheroes. And they had a ton of members like Superboy Red, Superboy Blue, Supergirl, Wonder Girl, etc. So the Fatal Five actually win and they change time. Meanwhile, in the modern day of our game world, there exists a hero named Hyperman who senses that the Fatal Five have tampered with the timeline. Hyperman is the son of Superman and Wonder Woman, who became a couple years after a villain named Magog killed Lois. Hyperman was trained by Batman, and among other things, his unusual origins have granted him access to something called hypertime. So not only can he travel forwards and backwards in his own timeline, but he can move side to side into alternate timelines as well. Point being, when the son of Superman and Wonder Woman realizes what's going on, he travels back in time to the 1950s, where he uses his cosmic powers to help stop the Fatal Five. So now that he's in the fight, the good guys win. By the way, when he meets his father, they are roughly the same age. So it's kind of like when Marty McFly met George McFly in 1955. Anyways, when he refuses to explain his true identity or his origins, the heroes who are native to the 50s refer to him as the Phantom Stranger. And the Phantom Stranger decides he'd better stay in the 50s for a while and look over his little half brother to make sure he will grow up and one day take his place as the post crisis Superman. Which brings us to the main plot of today's game, which takes place in 1952, which, by the way, is when the first appearance of the Phantom Stranger was in comics. The Phantom Stranger becomes aware of another group of villains from the future who have come back in time to make changes that they would benefit from. And like himself, they also seem to have access to hypertime. So the Phantom Stranger travels to the mysterious Black Pyramid that serves as their base of operations. Unlike the pyramids of Egypt that were built out of stone, this pyramid was built in the future and is sort of like the TARDIS from Doctor Who. When the Phantom Stranger goes there, he finds 13 of the most sinister villains of all time, dedicated to a single objective: the conquest of the universe. The villains consist of Absolute Zero, Agent D, Copycat, the Dauntain, Dr. Hadron, High Score, Hypnos, Jarhead, Omnicron, Overlord, Techno, Triton, and Vindicator, all of whom were original characters that we created for our role-playing game, who in every single case turned out to be so good at what they did that no hero was ever able to defeat them. The Phantom Stranger enters the pyramid-shaped time machine and tells the 13 that they should not be here and that they should give up their evil ways. To his surprise, they seem to listen to reason and heed his warning that they're tampering with forces beyond their ken. In fact, the Phantom Stranger thinks that everything is going his way. But this is just what Hypnos wants him to think. In reality, the Phantom Stranger is just standing there. In his head, he has saved the day. So for right now, that's what's happening in the 1950s. Meanwhile, as the modern day of our game world falls victim to various time quakes and temporal disasters, the young female superhero named Eldridge runs around putting out fires, both figurative and literal. Eldridge is the daughter of Fembra and Pulsar, whose powers in turn were caused by the Philadelphia experiment in 1943. And as such, like her namesake, she can travel through time and dimensions at will. Eldridge uses these abilities to travel to the headquarters of the mysterious Time Variance Authority, a bureaucratic organization that exists outside of time and space and monitors changes to the timeline. She asks them what's going on, and according to Agent Mobius, it has something to do with Hypnos, the being that the Greeks and Romans thought of as the god of hypnotism. Eldridge suggests they go back in time and talk to this Hypnos guy, but Mobius tells her that's an incredibly bad idea, because what Hypnos does is he enters your mind and he makes everything is going your way, when in reality, it's always the opposite, and you are helpless to do anything about it. As the temporal disasters worsen, the TVA is flooded by dinosaurs. So as the agents open fire on the invading velociraptors, Eldridge rifles through their drawers and finds a bunch of infinity gems that the TVA uses paperweights. Unfortunately, the infinity gems are weakened when you take them out of their home dimension, and eventually they become completely powerless. Thus, why they're used as paperweights. But Eldridge is able to find enough copies of each gem from various timelines and dimensions that she's able to travel back in time and use the gems she does have to locate the main infinity gems in the past. More time travelers show up, including the man who was the Flash of his timeline before it started to unravel. Flash asks if she's seen Hyperman, and she said she hasn't. So together they team up with his brother, who had become the Captain America of his timeline. And they go back to when the Fatal Five attacked the Super Sons. They fast forward, and while in an invisible state, they follow the Phantom Stranger until it gets to the part where he goes to the Black Pyramid. Between all the villains and their various sensory abilities, they detect the heroes even though they were invisible and out of phase with their surroundings. Dr. Hadron makes them visible and tangible again, and the Flash and Captain America attack the villains. This future Flash is cocky and says, "Let a real hero show you how it's done." He fights the villains, but it's a hopeless situation. Captain America fights to the very end. For him, it's not about being brash, it's the duties of being a Captain America and the responsibility of never giving up. He tells Eldridge to make a run for it while he has the villain's attention, and she does. The Flash and Captain America die fighting the good fight, but Eldridge knows that if she can just figure all of this out, then none of this will have ever happened. She puts the super intelligence that she inherited from her father to good use, and she knows of one man who has always been a friend to every member of the superhero community and who has been alive in just about every time period ever, and that is Superman Red. But she's not sure where to find him in 1952. So she decides to start asking the most attractive female superheroes where she can find Superman Red. And sure enough, several of them know his address. So Eldridge travels to Albion, Montana, just northwest of the geographic center of the United States. Here, the man known as Red has built a new Camelot of sorts, a mansion so big you could literally think of it as a castle. Eldridge enters the mansion and finds Red in an indoor swimming pool swimming laps. He's surprised to see her, and even more surprised when she gives him the Infinity Gems. The extra gems quit working after all the various types of traveling she did on her way here. But the red gem of power, the orange gem of time, the yellow gem of reality, the green gem of soul, the blue gem of mind, the purple gem of space, the white gem of ego, and the black gem of continuity all still work. These are the gems native to 1952, and these gems have never been taken out of their dimension, so they are at full power. Eldridge gives Superman Red the gems, begging him to just fix this whole situation, which honestly was her player giving them to the GM and saying she felt overwhelmed. So, Superman Red, also at this point known as the Red King, takes the gems, and since it's only 1952, he has never heard the phrase Infinity Gauntlet before. So instead, he turns each one into a men's ring, and he wears them all. And using the black Infinity Gem, he learns what continuity Eldridge came from, as well as how Hypnos caused the Red King to meet the Ghost Rider of Rome, something that never happened in the timeline of Eldridge. So the Red King goes to the Black Pyramid with the Infinity Gems, and he destroys the 13 villains that had previously been unable to be defeated by anybody. Then he calls in his son, Aramis Pendragon, who works for Bureau 13 and who oversees a facility called Warehouse 13 in South Dakota. Aramis comes to where the Black Pyramid is and talks to his dad. Eldridge meets Aramis, and for her, it's love at first sight. Aramis likes her too. And this is a big deal because their parents are arguably the four biggest original characters in our entire game world. So Aramis and Eldridge hooking up is quite a thing. And that brings us to the epilogue. Eldridge stays in 1952 with Aramis, partially to be with him, partially because she came from one of many possible futures that will now never come to pass. So she has no home to return to. And the Red King holds on to the Infinity Gems after the crisis is over, which is a bit of a cliffhanger because, like we said in the last video, where we saw the Red King is causing the Black Queen and the White Queen of the Hellfire Club to become better people, they too, though, have been having an effect on him. And now the morally compromised Superman Red has the Infinity Gems. But that's a story for another day. This was an interesting game, partially because, once again, thanks to time travel, characters from the modern day of our game world have gone into the past and changed things. Something that has happened since the very beginning of the game, all the way back in 1985. In fact, we've been playing this game for so long, Back to the Future 1 was in theaters when we played the first adventure. And I was a huge fan of Back to the Future. I loved that it wasn't just another dumb beat 'em up, that instead it introduced the general public to new ideas like what's a time paradox? And I've always loved that sort of thing. So it's no wonder that I've used time travel so much in my game world over the years. But what makes it a little different this time around is that I've been uploading daily videos, often based on games we played a long time ago. But now we're going to have to play some new games that reflect these new changes. And that's not something I can do on a daily basis. So, unfortunately, starting with this adventure, the videos are going to have to be spaced out a little bit more. When I can, I'll record actual gameplay and upload that, which I'm looking forward to. Also, I would like to specifically give a shout out to the Evil DM, who has always been a good friend of the channel and who has been particularly supportive of us in the past. He's a great guy, and if you haven't checked out his channel, I'll put a link to it below. I enjoy the DC Heroes campaign that he's running, and in his game world, instead of having an Infinity Gauntlet, he has Infinity Rings, something that I had heard, then forgot about. But then in this adventure, when my wife gave the GMPC the Infinity Gems, my thought process was that Thanos hadn't put them on his gauntlet yet, and we're about 40 years too early for the phrase Infinity Gauntlet, right? And I figured that from Superman Red's point of view, he probably wouldn't think of that. So when I had to think about how would a man wear large gemstones in the 1950s, I got to thinking about my old class ring from high school. And I have seen businessmen wear a ring with like a big red ruby on it or something along those lines, anyways. And for whatever reason, I've been associating the Hellfire Club with mafia movies, and I've seen mafia guys with kind of big chunky rings on their fingers. So I was trying to think of what would look the part. So I said infinity rings in this game. And at the time, I didn't think twice about it. But then as I was typing up this adventure and I typed infinity rings on the page, it jogged my memory. So I reached out to the DM, excuse me, the evil DM to touch base with him. So I just wanted to thank him again here. I think his idea was probably in the back of my mind. And while I wasn't trying to rip him off, I think we did by accident. So anyways, I want to give credit where credit is due. So thank you to the evil DM for inventing the Infinity Rings. We'll see what the future holds. Maybe after 40 years, Thanos will come gunning for Superman Red, pry the rings off his cold dead fingers, and turn them into the Infinity Gauntlet after all. We don't know. Time will tell. I do think that things have taken an interesting turn. Hopefully you think it's interesting too. If so, smash the like button, make sure you're subscribed, ring the bell for notifications, and leave us a comment because that really helps us out on our end. From all of us here at the longest running superhero role-playing game on Earth, we hope that you guys have a good one, and we will see you in the next adventure. Bye.